To migrate the catcher game into our game state framework is going to take a little bit of effort, but along the way we will realize that it is not an insurmountable hurdle. So one of the first things that we will want to do as we roll through this is to move some files over. So I currently have my game state file that we developed previously, and then the catcher game that was developed previously. And with these, I'm going to just need access to the contents of those other files. So the timer file I can leave. I don't need a copy of that in my game state because there's already one in the game state, because we're using the timer file in its unadulterated form. We didn't add or extend upon that. So that one we can leave. We don't need to copy it over. But the catcher, the drop, and then I will need content from game 0 from the primary game file that we used previously. So I will copy that over, and when I do that, it will then show up as a tab in the other project. So we can just copy these files over. So now everything that I need is inside my game state catcher project folder. And what I will do is reopen that, and we should now see all of those other files are now accessible to us within one project, making it pretty easy to work with it. So game state now has access to the drop class. It has access to the catcher object. The timer is still just the timer, and we will be grabbing most of the content here out of game 0 and migrating that into our catcher file, because that is our primary controller that organizes the whole process. So within this, I'm going to leave the countdown timer because I want to have that happen in the catcher game as well. And currently we can see that the countdown timer has 3 on it, which is fairly short for a game. So during the catcher game, we will have to extend that out. And that's also one of the reasons why when this was set up, we set it up not just time left equals a fixed number, but put this in so that it's easier to update, because now when I want to update that within the game, we're able to find out, on our time left. So we're able to work with that as well as reset it, so we don't have to change the number in multiple places. It's a good practice that when you are assigning values to things, not the starting value so much as maximum or total values, that you assign that to a variable, because most often you will reference that particular number more than once in your code, and if you've set it to a variable, then you just go into your setup and just change its value at that point. Noticing that we have an error message and it tells us duplicate method draw in game state catcher, and that's because when I added these additional tabs in here, like game 0, it also has setup and it has draw because that was the previous standalone game. So because of that, we know that we're going to have to ditch those things. When we're all done, this game 0 file will be deleted once we've migrated all of its content into our game state file. But for now, it's nice just to have it separate so we can start kind of moving things over. Because if we just put the whole thing in there, then that becomes a lot of code here combined with a lot of code here to make sense out of as we try to figure out how to set up each one of those items. So to start moving everything over and cleaning it up, as I look at this, the biggest part is under my play game, we're going to leave the countdown information because we will use the countdown timer in the catcher game. So if you don't catch enough by a certain time window, you lose the game. but this other logic, which is then going to be just finding out have you moved the mouse left or right. We don't really need that. We're not going to be using that as part of this game, so I'm going to comment it out. I'm not going to delete it just yet because it does have some information that I want to be reminded of, such as managing my wins and losses as part of it, so that as we roll through this game, we can still track how many times have I won or lost the catcher game. Now, to move the catcher game over, we're going to need to grab a lot of the content. So I need the catcher object, I need the drops, number of drops. We'll need our main game timer as part of it. Now our game state framework, we can see it kept track of wins and losses, but it didn't have anything that was a score per se. So that means we can bring that over as well. So all of the variables that are in the game0 file, I'm going to grab those. And every time I migrate something over, I'm going to comment out after I've copied it so that it's no longer part of the previous file and is going to just be part of the main file. Just going to put a comment so I know where I am. This is my variables from catcher game. I'll paste that in. So now we have access to those items. The next thing that we want to do, setup, we don't care about that. Size, we're setting that elsewhere. But we do need now our catcher, our drops. Then we'll have the time interval and the score information. So all of this content here. So I'll copy that, comment out the previous. And now that goes inside of my setup. So just giving myself a comment as to what I am doing. Now, because I do have the error with the duplicate setup and duplicate draw stuff going on right now, I can't use auto format to clean things up as I put those in. Whenever we work with multiple timer objects, we do have to be aware of how we name them. So I have the countdown timer. Now I have, this is really my drop timer. So I may want to rename that, especially if I add any other kinds of timer objects into the project. Now, if when I'm using the timer that I'm going to be doing it as a 1 second check for everything, so it's always going to be based on 1 second, then I really only do need one kind of timer. I don't need to make multiple timers to work with in my project. But if I'm going to have my timers based on different values, so the time interval of 100, that means it's 100 milliseconds between every drop falling down, so it's fairly quick, versus my clock timer saying how much time I have left is going 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. So they're a little bit different that way. Okay, so now I've migrated over a big chunk of things. So setup, I'm just going to completely comment that out, so that eliminates that error message there. Now, if we look, we have the intersect method. We're going to need that. We'll have to move that over. And clear background, I think we were doing some version of a clear background over here. It was just filling it with solid white, where in the previous game we were filling it with less than solid white when we called clear background, so that it left a little bit of a ghosting trail. So if we want to use the other one or migrate it, so I'll just comment that out to know that I'm going to add in the value over here of the kind of almost 50% transparent. So it's more on the transparent side than the opaque side, because 128 would put it at exactly 50% transparent, knowing that the range is 0 to 255 for alpha. So if I say 255, that means fill it with white, or the color of 255, 255, 255, and my alpha value is 120, which is approximately half on that. Now going back into the game object, or the game class, I will go grab my intersect. I'll move that over, and looks like we can just put that down here near the bottom. Now once you get a bunch of different functions inside your program, it's a good idea to start thinking about how you want to organize them and what kind of flow you have going in with them into your project. So now we've moved those over, and it looks like now I have my draw method here, where I'm going to go and grab everything that's inside draw. You can copy that. Now I'm going to comment the whole thing out, because we don't need that over there anymore. And now where that's going to end up going inside of is that's going to be inside of my play game here. So I'm going to leave that there. So now we'll paste in the catcher game logic. I'll just put some space so I can see the space happening. And currently, now we get to play the game. Now if I play this, the game is going to end after a couple seconds, and then I will lose, and there's currently no way to really win because we're not tracking that yet. But what we could do is we could put that in so we can find out once the score goes up in the game. That would be a really great place to think about making it similar to when the mouse is less than 50, that set our win state. So our wins went up. So it would be these lines right here of, we can now actually grab the comment as well. So if the score goes up, then we can say if score, and we can set a threshold of how much we need to win the game. So we could say something like if score is greater than or equal to something like 5, when we do that, then we can paste in and say we win. Wins goes up, game state becomes win. So now if the score is greater than 5, we win, but if the countdown, I'm just going to move this up. Here, so if the countdown goes here, we lose, and if we lose, let's add in the rest of the lose logic, where we set the losses. So now if the timer runs out, losses goes up and the game state switches over to lose. So we're making progress here. There's no error messages I can auto format, so theoretically things are in pretty good shape. If I look at game 0, everything is commented out, so I've now moved that over. And it also means now in our game state start, we may want to change the message where it says click anywhere to play, go left to win, go right to lose. Well, that doesn't really hold true anymore because that's not how we play the game. Moment of truth, now that I've moved everything over, I'm going to try and run my project and we'll see what happens and if it even works. Oh, I forgot to change my text of go left to win, go right to lose. So we'll find out. But if I click, let's see, catcher game, it started. I caught 1, 2. Oh, I lost. Okay, now, oh, so we can see there's a problem going on here. Oh, so I have 1. Let's try and lose. But every time it restarts, we'll notice that all the drops are still falling exactly. I catch 1 and I win. So we get some problem. Well, depends. If you want to make yourself feel good, maybe it's not a problem because, you know, I keep winning. But it's not correct gameplay. And it, wow, that's a lot of drops that are falling. So we're going to have to address that. We have to figure out how to reset the objects in our game so everything isn't active and running. So this is now moving into that next phase. So the good part, the part that we should feel good about, is we're able to run it and there weren't any error messages, so that's nice. But we do need to figure out how to reset the game a little bit better. So let's see, if I win and I lose, let's see, we have draw replay button, show score, so they're both calling the same thing. Show score, replay button. Now we do have under reset game, when that is called, so if I have reset game where we reset the game and then change our game state to play, that doesn't, resetting the game and changing the game state to play, so under win and lose, we draw the replay button. But drawing the replay button, even though this is how we set it up previously, this probably isn't going to be the most ideal way of going about this, but because when we reset the game, we need to think about resetting more than just the countdown timer and resetting the time that's going to show up in that timer. But we also now need to reset the score so we don't immediately win after catching one item. As we look at this as well, the time left is now showing up at a position of x of 20, y of 100. Now the score is showing up at a position of 10 and 20. So we may want to think about trying to at least be a little bit more consistent on that. So I'm going to modify the score so the score is showing up. We'll put the score at 2020, time left at 2100. But the score does need to reset as part of it. So we reset our score back to 0. And in doing so, now if I choose to play the game, which, before I forget, under start game, go left to win, go right to lose, we know that's not really correct anymore. Now it's catch the drops. And I will put on line 2 before time runs out. which that is now more appropriate to what is happening within our current game structure. So now when it runs, catch the drops before time runs out. We can see how many wins and losses we've had. And had a little interesting thing. The score was showing up there periodically, but not consistently. So if I hit play again, we'll see the score shows up when I catch something. So now we need to figure out what is happening. And to begin the detective work on that, we need to go back and think about where we're asking the score to show up on screen. When are we drawing that text on screen? And we can use as a clue, where did we migrate it from previously? Because previously we had inside our draw method where then we show that text on screen. So now let's go into our new game, and under play game, so play game gets called when it is the correct game state. So we call play game, and then that is showing up 60 times a second. So we update the catcher, that's working. Then the timer for the drops, that's working. The drops are falling. So we're updating that information there. Countdown logic is occurring. And now here we have, this is putting our text on screen. So that's using our string S. And then we also have showing our countdown occurring over here. So what probably needs to happen is we need to think about not having these separate, but instead putting it together. If we're same alignment, same size, we can have multiple fill colors and text and then just put it on screen. So I'm going to take this UI and cut it from there and move it down over here as we start trying to clean things up. Now, as soon as I did that, what I will notice is that updating the score, part of the reason why it was not updating is it was inside our countdown timer logic. So through the joys of copy pasting, it seems that that information for updating the score ended up inside of the countdown timer instead of into its own area. So that was the reason why the countdown or the score information was not showing up on screen. But these are both doing similar things in that they're showing text on screen. Probably, so if we set s equal to the value here, we don't need to create a new variable called s. We can just say now s is going to be equal to time left and then show that text there. So if we run it, now we can see score and time left are there. But it looks fairly ugly having them so far apart. And what I may want to do is reverse it, because I think I would rather have the time left on top, the score showing up underneath as far as order of view. So I'm going to just reverse those first. Now, with that, text align left, text size center, because we're using the same for both, we don't need both of those. We don't need to repeat that. The fill color, red, that's the same, so we don't need to repeat that as well. And this is a big part when you are doing any type of programming is as you work with it, you realize that you can become more efficient in how you've organized the elements that you are putting into it and remove any redundancies. That's a key thing when coding is we don't want to have things repeating unnecessarily. If we don't have to say the same command twice, we shouldn't. So those were redundant commands. So we set our alignment left, size 12, color red. Now we set the string time left here. I want that on top, so that means I'm going to modify its position. I'll say that one at 20 and this one at, we'll try 40. That should give some spacing, but not that huge gap that we saw before. And now this is a lot more logical and easier to follow. I'm just going to move the comment to where it makes more sense and put one here, show score. Put the comments liberally into your code. That is going to help it become much more readable as you work with it, because when any length of time goes by that you haven't been working with it, it's really easy to lose track. So all of this now has been integrated, so I'm going to delete that out of there so that we can see. Yeah, so it does appear that when I pasted in the some of the scoring, it ended up in the timer, and then that caused problems with that. So now if we run the game, you can see the score. I'll just try and intentionally lose. I lost one. Now I can catch, 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 catch. Oh, I didn't catch him in time. There, now I caught 5. 5 is pretty easy to catch because there's so many drops on screen right now. So that will be our next item that we want to tackle, is how can we get it so that when the game starts out, there's fewer drops. I'm also going to, as part of that process, modify the drop timer, the time interval, so that they don't fall every 1/10 of a second, but instead, well, every half second we'll have a new drop appear on screen. So that gives us a little bit more time. And I'm going to extend out our maximum time for the game to 5 right now. We might even bump that up so we can verify how things are working in a bit. But now we have 5, and now with fewer drops happening, we'll have to actually try a little bit to catch all 5 to win. Now I've gone in and modified our to-do and completed here now that we've got a major portion of things done. Should have done that earlier, but now we can start to see where problems are. So resetting the drops, because currently I play the game, the drops don't reset, and I want to add in a sudden death object. So when I run the game and I start playing, we can see, okay, there's my drops, and when the timer runs out, if I play again, the drops pick up exactly where they left off last time, and they keep doing that. So that's not really going to be an ideal situation. So we need to figure out how to reset the drops, and then we'll work on a secondary object. I think the answer for resetting the drops is probably going to be inside the drop class for part of it, because when we look in the drop class, there was something hanging out there that hasn't been mentioned but has been there from the beginning, and that is a reset method. So this reset method is hanging out inside the class waiting for us to do something with it. So it was put there knowing that we would probably have to do it. I haven't talked about it prior to this point, but now is an appropriate time to do so. So when a drop is caught, its speed is killed and it gets tossed off screen. What we can think about doing is, okay, well, drops, when we want them to move, they have a speed y value. So we have kind of two options available to us. One is when the drop runs the screen, currently when it's normally animating, if it goes off the bottom of the screen, we put it back to the top of the screen and it does an asteroid style wrap. So it starts at the top, goes to the bottom, goes right back, but it's falling through the same vertical column. Its X value never changes. But it would make more sense when we're resetting the drops to think about resetting their X values, and we also need to reset their speed to a value that they can then start moving on screen. Now the Y, we've already put them off screen, so we don't need to modify that, but the X and the speed Y we do need. So inside of reset, this is where we need to put in that information of start them at a new position, give them speed again. Because when they were caught, we killed their speed and we chucked them up off above the visible plane surface of the game. So now the reset method has something to it. It allows us to reposition their X and give them a speed value once more. So to use the reset, well, let's look through our main program here and start trying to figure out where we might want to put it. In the reset game, that's going to be a very appropriate place that we will want to reset all of our drops to put them on screen where we need them. So to reset the drops and to put these back onto the screen, set the drops. This is where we get to use one of our fantastic for loops, and we get to tell all the drops to reset themselves. So as we go through and do this, so for int I is equal to 0, semicolon, I is less than my number of drops, semicolon, and then I will go up by 1 each time. Curly brace, return twice, close curly, up arrow once. Always remember that mantra in your head, and that's going to save you hours and hours and hours of troubleshooting while you're trying to find where you have misplaced or missing curly brace. So now I need to go through and tell each one of my drops, and we'll do drops square brackets I to reset. So I can look in the drop class. We have the reset method. We're calling the reset method here, so we tell each one of our drops to reset themselves. So that's a good start. If I run through this again, let's try and lose. Now, you can see that we're having some issues occurring here. So while we've told all the drops to reset themselves, something else that we may need to keep track of, and that will be visible when we look up in the play game section up here. When we look in play game section, we can see that our normal drops are updated in display based on the number of active drops that are happening within our program. Active drops went up every time the timer ran, and it went up until it reached the number of drops. But we never told active drops to reset. So we told all of the drops to reset, but we also need to reset active drops back down to 0. So if I void for 5 seconds and play again, we're close to having it reset. We have a couple of other things that we need to worry about. So we reset the active drops on it. So that now starts trickling them out. But we also now need to tell, while we have the countdown timer going, we need to tell the main timer to restart properly as well. So we do timer, and this is our drop timer. Probably should be renamed now that we have 2 timers in our project instead of just generic timer, but our default timer is from our catcher game and it was only tied to the drops. So we're using that. So now we tell the timer to start the same way we tell the countdown timer to start. And then this gets us so that now when we reset, we'll see the drops. So it only does 1 at a time, but they're not fully resetting their Y values yet. So we do in this, and it's going to take a little sleuthing on it to figure out exactly, because it should be, we've reset all the ones that, actually I guess, well, when they're caught they get put off screen. If they're not caught and then they're animating, they don't get reset. So that's why we do in fact need to reset all of them, because if I catch, in this case, if I catch a certain number I win. If I'm not catching them, they weren't ever caught, so their Ys were never put back to 0. So then when we start dropping the drops again, that's why they're showing up kind of where they left off instead of at the top of the screen. So under reset, we need to reset the X, reset the Y, because originally when I was saying, oh, we don't need the Y, I was thinking about we're only resetting the ones we caught, and then the other ones have never fallen, so they never were on screen. Forgetting that when the timer runs out, we could have any number of drops on the screen and none of them have been caught, so we never have reset their Y value. That's why they were still falling. So reset, we reset the X, set the Y so they're off screen, reset their speed so they're falling, and now when we do this, the drops will behave properly once we run out of time. And now they start falling again, always from the top and not from the middle of the screen. So our reset drops now gets to move from our to-do to our completed list. If you know when you sit down to work that there's going to be a number of different things you're trying to accomplish, I do encourage you to use to-do and completed sections and list that at the beginning, so then you can keep track of what you're trying to do, and then also it gives you that validation of you've successfully done something and completed it. To add in our bomb object, what I want to do, this will be a secondary object. It's going to be very much almost identical. Its class will be virtually the same as the drop class. It's going to fall, and we'll figure out how to do that. So I will be copy pasting from that. But first I'm going to make a new tab to put this in. This will be my bomb. Now you can have secondary objects of your own. I don't care what you call them, what they are, etc. But you get to put them in your project. You will notice when we add tabs, it does alphabetize them across the top of the screen, so that's the order that they appear, because bomb I just added, yet it's now right after my main program. Now, this bomb class, we need to modify it a little bit so that it's no longer a drop, but is a bomb. When I put the bomb on screen, my bomb is going to be big. So I am going to give it a radius of 32. So it'll be 64 pixels wide when it's done. Its X position will be random. Its Y position, I'll just set it as a -r times 4, so it starts somewhere off screen. It will have a random speed somewhere between 5 to 8. And the color for this is just going to be 0. I'm going to just let it be black because it's a big black bomb that's going to fall down from the sky. Now that I've put that in, everything's the same. So this object is really just an extension of the drop class, or it's in some ways it's a duplicate of the drop class. Give this a little bit of jitter. What we can do is modify the x position by a random amount, and I'm going to say -2, 2. So what that will do is it's going to add or subtract some random value between 0 and 2 from the x position of the object. So it could start kind of jiggling diagonally down the screen if you keep getting, the same minus, 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 or plus, plus, plus. But realistically, it should kind of just fall under a squiggly weirdness. But it's going to give it a little bit more vibration. So that completes the bomb object. And now in our catcher game, what we could do is decide, do we want multiple ones or just a single object? So if I have a single kind of sudden death object, then that just means that's what I'm avoiding. And we could potentially set it up so that every time you win the game, it ups the level of the game, and then that could give you additional hazard objects that fall. So that would be a way to do it, but I'm going to start out with just one. And the thought process is get one thing working first. Once you know that one item is working, then we can look at ways that we could add more to that or extend it and grow that process. So as I do this, we need to now add in our bomb. Now the bomb, I will just say this is going to be an object of type bomb, and we'll just set it equal to B right now. And I'm just going to put it up here so it's on screen. I was just seeing if there was a better place to put it. So B is equal to a new bomb. So now that I have a new bomb on screen, inside my play game, this is where I can work on adding that bomb. So I want the bomb to, so I draw the catcher first, then I draw the drops. Now the bomb, because it's sudden death, if I want the bomb to sit behind the falling drops, I would put it here so its display happens first. If I want the bomb to fall on top of the drops, then I would put it after that. So I want the bomb to be here. And for that, we can just say b.update, b.display. So it's very similar to the catcher because we only have a single entity. So we don't have to use the for loop to go through an array of bombs or hazard objects falling down on screen. Now running that, when the game runs, we could see, hey, and we can see how it's got that little jiggle factor going on. Now, with it falling, I don't know if that's really where I like it. Instead of always falling in the same line, I think it would be nice to modify this so that when it does its screen wrap, the X takes on a new value. So inside the bomb class, X is going to be random width. And that will then position it so that every time it runs, it's going to be falling in a new column. So it's always there, falling behind the drops in a new column. Speed-wise, I don't think it's dangerous enough yet. It seems kind of slow. So I'm going to up the ante and say 10 to 15 for the speed of the bomb so that it falls faster. So we set a variable bomb of type, so the variable is B, it's of type bomb. Then inside our setup, B is equal to a new bomb. So then inside our play game, we are now able to tell the bomb to update and bomb to display. What we next want to find out is if intersect with my catcher object and my bomb B is true, curly, return twice, close curly, up arrow once, and now I want to, at this point, so if I intersect, I want to immediately end the game and say game state equals lose, because you're the biggest loser. So we're checking to see if we've intersected the catcher with our bomb, and if so, our game state is immediately set to lose. We can see how it's having issues because it says the function intersect catcher bomb doesn't exist. And what that means is our current intersect function is looking for different parameters. If I look at intersect here with my drops, intersect is looking for a catcher object and a drop object. It's not looking for a catcher object and a bomb object. So to fix that, what we can do is go down to our intersect function. And when we find the intersect function, which should be down at the bottom, currently intersect is looking to intersect a catcher and a drop object. One of the nice things that we can do inside of processing is we can have two functions of the same name, but they have different parameters, so that we can write the same function that can take two different kinds of objects. It could even have a different number of things. So it could take a catcher, a bomb, and something else if we were checking a three-object intersection. So when we do this, processing allows us, and other languages do this as well, is we can have the same named function that can accept a variety of different parameters as input. So we don't have to say intersect drop function and then intersect bomb function. We can just let it be intersect. And then we change the kinds of things it's looking for. And there's a number of things that do this already that we've already used. So if I look at my bomb class, I'll say C is equal to color 0. So I only provided one value. But if I go to my drop, I will see that I've provided three values, an R, a G, and a B value for the same function or method, color. So color, the way it's written, if we go into the actual program specification, we will see that the color method or function is listed multiple times, each time taking different inputs, whether it takes RGB, whether it takes grayscale, whether it takes an alpha channel, so it can take all of these as part of its different inputs. If we run this now that we have our two intersects and the one is immediate sudden death, I'm getting an error message here. And the error message I'm getting is I typed in a made up I can't even say intersect. There we go. And now when I do this, game comes up, I can, oh look, I hit the falling black ball and died right away. But notice the black ball, if I end the game, it's going to restart right here because, well, everything else is nicely being reset within our program. So I go into the program, I look at reset game, and reset game is resetting everything, but it's not resetting the bomb. So with that, we probably need to tell the bomb to reset itself as well. So we can just simply say b.reset as part of it. Now if I run it, Oh, and it finally got a super slow speed. So this is going to be, and then I ran out of time. Extra slower. And when I call reset, one thing that I'm noticing as part of this, the bomb starts out with a speed y of 10 to 15. When I reset, I'm setting the speed down to a 1 to 5. So I'm not setting it equal to that higher amount. This updating it now fixes that. What it also clues me in is if I'm now declaring the same thing in two places and that caused a problem in my program, if I look at the x, y, and speed y, these three values, x, y, and speed y, what I could do inside my constructor, instead of setting them there, I can just call the reset method, which then populates those three values for me, and then I don't have to worry about the problem I ran into where the first time it worked, second time it didn't. It's like, hey, something's wrong. And now we've fixed it. So now if I run it, I'm trying to die. There we go. And it still stays on sudden death. So we've added in a second object. We have modified it so that that object can be caught or crashed into. We've set it so that the object can reset itself. So now we're well on our way to creating a functional and complete game. What I'm going to do is just modify the display of my bomb object. Currently it just draws a basic black ellipse as the background. Now I'm going to choose a red color and then draw two more ellipses. And this time I'll draw my first one. I'll just move the X over. So the object is coming in at 64, so we'll move it over 15. So we'll do a X plus 20. And then Y minus 15. And these are going to be the eyes. So the eyes will do a circular at 10, 10. So this draws one red eye. Now, if I want to draw a second red eye, this one, the X, actually we want to do X minus 20 for the left eye, X plus 20 for the right eye. The Y stayed the same. And now if I run it, let's see what does the, are we getting close? They're a little too wide, I think, so I don't want to go quite that far. Guess I should have stuck with my initial guesstimate of 15. And I want to do a fill color of yellow for a mouth. And this mouth will draw it at a rectangle, and it will be X minus 15 for the starting corner. It'll be Y plus, try about 10. So it moves it down a little bit. And then the width will be 30. And the height for it will be, we'll just try 10 and see how that looks. So now we got this falling little face. I think I want to pull the eyes in even a little bit more, so we'll just do 10s instead of 15s and run that. Probably would be better, yeah, that works, to have drawn the object while it's not moving so I can better assess its visual. It'd make it a little bit easier, but it does change appearance as it falls as well, so doing it while it's falling is not a bad plan. And by having a different display, then this is also why when we have two separate classes, it kind of, for the bomb and the drop, that it makes sense that we do it that way.